Practice 12. Energy scanning. 1. Perform 1 circulation of fire breath. 2. On the second round, as you move energy up the spine to the back heart area, keep the arms relaxed and let the energy branch out from the heart to fill the arms and hands with magnetized heat. Feel pulsing, moisture, or a tingling sensation form in the palms and fingers. Maintain the arms relaxed with the fingers softly curled. 3. Continue bringing the energy up the back with fire breath. Finally, activating the inner eye by breathing through the back sinuses. Then tip the head slightly to transfer the energy through the forehead to the liquid side of the body. Chan calls the front the liquid side because the majority of gland and organ fluids are formed in the front. 4. Breathe down the front side of the body using abdominal expansion on the inhale until the energy reaches the heart area and again floods the arms and hands with warmth, and this time the additional soft, caressing feeling of love. 5. The first exercise to develop sensitized, healing hands is to use the breath again in order to pump up the energy field around them. Using a moderately forceful exhale through the back throat, back sinuses, and nostrils, combined with abdominal contraction, pump the air out. The sound this breath makes is reminiscent of a bicycle pump. This will fuel the fire of your energy field. 6. Now test the magnetized sensation of your hands by slowly raising them, still keeping them relaxed with fingers softly curled. Gently move them towards one another until you feel them repel like identical poles of 2 magnets. Use the pumping breath to increase the size of your field and build up the distance between the palms. The greater the distance you can maintain before feeling the palms repel, the greater will be the capacity of your palms to sense irregularities during a scan and to move the energy in a corrective, balancing fashion. 7. Practice often. When you wish to return the energy, follow the rest of the process for completing fire breath, bringing the energy all the way down the front of the body to be stored in the center of will. Chapter 13. The Female Orgasmic Practices. I spent the rest of the afternoon and evening alone in Doña Celestina's home. When no one returned by dinner, I heated some chicken tamales and served them smothered with pumpkin seed mole sauce. I felt that everyone was intentionally giving me some time to be alone. So after dinner, I listened to Mozart on a national public radio broadcast from Yuma and then went to bed. I was awakened by a knock at my bedroom door at about 4 a.m. Having turned in earlier the previous night, I was not at all startled by the knock. I ran my fingers through my hair and opened the door to find Doña Celestina standing there, fully dressed. "Put on your robe and come to my garden," she whispered. I slipped the dust-colored silk dressing gown over my nightgown and followed her through the passageway, turning right down the little hall before reaching the waiting area of her consultation room. She unlocked the wooden door at the end of the small hallway, and I saw that it opened onto her enclosed private garden. A very fragrant night-blooming flower abounded there. The air was heady with large white trumpeting blossoms open to the moonlight, which she called florefundio. I was also immediately aware of the presence of many huge flying moths. They flitted and sputtered everywhere. We tiptoed along a tiny path that led to a mesh nursery of sorts, larger than a birdhouse, but smaller than a dovecote, where thanks to the moonlight, I could make out many cocoons in various stages of development attached to the sides of the mesh. There were quite a few large, moist, partially chewed leaves at the bottom of the construction, which appeared to have served as food for the larvae or the emerging adult. I remembered having read that many moths like nightshade, and I looked around to see if any was about, noticing only the florifundio. I also noticed that something which looked very much like honey had been applied to some leaves that were stuck into the mesh, and also to some of those sitting half-eaten at the bottom of the nursery. "What kind of moths are they?" I asked. "Come and have a look," she whispered, and led me to a bush where a very large moth sat resting, wings open. It was glorious. Beautiful buttery vanilla ice cream with caramel swirls for colors, and large eye designs on the wings, which when opened were as massive as the palm of my hand. I crooned. "She's letting you get very close," Doña Celestina said. "See if you can touch her, but not on the wings. Touch her underside. That's what she'll like." I extended the tip of my ring finger to softly stroke her furry, bulbous underbody. Her hair was thick and soft, like shaved ermine. The touch seemed pleasurable to her, and she moved her body rhythmically back and forth to meet the tip of my finger. "That's enough," Doña Celestina said. "We don't want to bother her. We just want to say hello." "This garden is beautiful at night," I remarked in earnest praise, drinking in the luminosity of the silvery, milky light that seemed to rest like dew on the surface of every living thing within it. "I thought you would appreciate it," Doña Celestina whispered. "This is my private place, where I come for a recharge." "It's magical," I exclaimed, almost wanting to dance among the flowers, the moths, and the moonlight. "I brought you here because healing work, although it circulates and feeds the sexual energies, can sometimes sap them a bit. I want to teach you some personal practices that are very private, sensual, abundant, and sublime, like my garden here. Practices that are just for women." Doña Celestina motioned toward a place on the ground where I could see fired clay tiles, creating a space large enough for sitting, set not far from a simple earthen bird basin and many flowering florifundio. We sat cross-legged on the tiles facing each other, enfolding our garments underneath us. "I'm going to speak candidly," she began. "Very well," I said. "I'm a grown woman. I've no time for prudery. We're going to deepen the topic of the female orgasm." "What? Do you mean Chan didn't want to teach me this?" I giggled. She smiled back in her sly way, teeth glinting in the moonlight. "You just wait. Juan is going to talk with you about the men." I gulped. That got to me. The mood was not one of whispered secrets in the wee hours. I humbly realized that I did not even know everything about my own body's responses, much less the capabilities of another gender, and that I was about to acquire life knowledge. "Women are different from men," Doña Celestina said, "not just by virtue of the womb, but also in that they are capable of a series of multiple climaxes, without losing the energy from one to the next. If a woman knows what she is doing, she can pull on an energetic column within the center of her being, and the sensations of energy will move upward, like going up a flight of stairs. It is possible for them to continue upward until they reach and fountain out of the top of her head, only to be recirculated again at the bottom of her pool of energy and sent back up to the top. The waters of a woman's womb, as I told you in my altar room, are present if the woman has the capacity for orgasmic response. If she has lost that capacity, we say she is cracked, like a broken vessel, because this energy center leaks. It is dried up, strained, and weak. Women must explore their own bodies and work through emotional traumas to rekindle their ability to reach climaxes of pleasure, if this possibility has been lost in them. As Chan has often told you, joy is soothing, balancing, and life-affirming. It strengthens the body for what it must endure, be it childbirth, hardship, old age, whatever. Many women who have lost their capacity for pleasure and have lost the waters of the womb instead reach climaxes of pain, which are life-denying and destructive, weakening to the forces since they are unnecessary. A woman must recover her capacity for orgasm, not only once, but consecutively. Too often we look to the men for our examples. In this case, it should be the other way around. Once this multiple capacity has been found, a woman may then go on to what I will share with you now. Before you do, Doña, what are the key points in working through emotional traumas? You are always able to concentrate issues into their essence. I was keenly interested in advice that she might have for women. First of all, she said, recognize that male energy can be indolent. Some individuals just want to expel the sexual energies to relieve themselves of pressure. This angers the serpent in both males and females and can cause trauma. The serpent will shed skins and over time will turn such uses of male energy into a fat ogre or a wasted weakling as it ages. On the other hand, many females withhold orgasmic responses out of manipulation, anger, or fear. This only cheats them, and with no waters, they begin to shrivel from the inside out. Or perhaps they remain emotional children. It would be far better for all to recognize these scenarios, end these relationships, and explore the pure nature of sexual energies. But often people remain in unfulfilling or even dangerous situations in the hopes of material benefit, companionship, or protection. Their own strength and resourcefulness would be better served as their protector, provider, and companion. But perhaps they lack courage. They seek someone else to fulfill them. You have seen for yourself in my consultation where these situations can lead. To compound that, we now live in a male-dominator society throughout most of the world, and this also works its ills on both males, females, and their offspring. Couple that with the repression implemented by organized religions and government exploitation, and you have a real mess. There are many steps to retrace. So, as with other practices of shamanism, in this day and age, the key is that we almost unlearn some of what we have learned and begin afresh. I paraphrased. Surviving in non-conventional circumstances will strengthen and purify us and deepens our wisdom, generating energy for us and allowing us to function in life through a healthy alternative. Exactly, the Doña nodded. But it's not always necessary to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Some people, like shamans and wise women, never really agree with the status quo. Perhaps because of it, they would not even survive, if not for some unseen power that makes them desirable in times of need. They never totally buy into the world order, hook, line, and sinker. You are one of those people, Merlina. And that is why you have so much freed energy to work with. You are not entangled in believing in a system, nor are you locked into rebelling against one. You have tremendous energy, and fortunately for you, it is not caught by things that do not work. This is an ideal situation. Such a position has much to offer female empowerment. Back to your practices, I said thoughtfully. How does a woman pull her sexual responses into higher energy centers? And what is the purpose other than the circulation of the energy? I asked. Even if the purpose were only circulation, that would be enough, Doña Celestina answered. As Chan has told you, circulating the energy is cleansing, healing, and restorative. It releases blocks, fills depletions, and balances the being. There's more to it, however. First of all, a woman not only circulates energy, she can actually generate energy with orgasm. Remember that this energy is not lost, being expelled from the body, as is the case for the male. A woman retains orgasmic energy within the body. She must pull the energy upwards so that all the energy centers, the entire energy body, in fact, reap the benefits. Otherwise, this energy is wasted in another way, through imbalance, which can cause problems. One center will overfill, and the others will go wanting, doing the work but receiving no replenishment. That is how a woman can exhaust herself. So you see, she must shift her focus and address all her energy centers. That is why I shifted mine and brought you here, into my garden. This place has a powerful sexual energy of a higher sort, she continued. It is silvery and placental in the moonlight. The earth is cool. The night flowers are open, fragrant, and blooming. And the moths, just look at them, pulsating, buzzing with energy, so lush and sensual. A very large Cecropia moth alighted near us. Observe the body, Doña Celestina explained, pointing gently to the beautiful creature with a bent index finger. The moth was perched at the tip of a florefundio blossom. It spread its wings and appeared to be resting there. Look at the wingspan, she whispered. Her energy must fountain above the tips of her antenna and out to the sides, well beyond the breadth of her wings, and then return to her base to act as the generator for pumping those wings in flight. As a caterpillar, she spun her cocoon from her lower sexual center, digesting leaves to feed it. Now she is purely highly sexual. The energy has been elevated. She eats less, and the energy emerges from the higher centers rather than from the lower, to create her wings and flight. Doña Celestina's explanation of the life cycle of these moths was matchless. I was in awe, observing them, as they fluttered about in the light of the waning moon. The women's internal energy column is like the silk cord of the moths, then, I volunteered. So it is, she spoke emphatically. They are speaking to you now. You have got a good dusting of their knowledge out here in these early hours. That same pulling and throbbing motion that a moth uses to emit her silken thread can also be used to pull the energy back in and up through the body to come out of the head and fountain around our energetic wingspan. Don Juan and Chan have already taught you the fire breath. For the orgasmic woman, the breath may be pulled up the central column rather than up the back. This is a different present in the woman's orgasmic breath. One powerful inward breath combined with one abdominal contraction and an upward pull on all of the internal muscles originating in the inner thighs, through the vagina and upwards, will lift the energy generation one rung on the ladder. Wow! I felt silly at my own lack of eloquence, but that sound just exploded from my lips. Doña Celestina controlled the desire to snicker at me. She demonstrated the breath, and I followed her example, breathing energy up from the vaginal area with an inhale, accompanied by an abdominal contraction, coupled with inner thigh, vaginal, and uterine contractions. You may wonder how an old Indian woman comes across knowledge like this, she smiled. The fact is, as a young woman, I first learned from a midwife. Many of the tools and magical implements that are on a witch's altar can also be found among the midwife's medicine bag. The knives, the water, the herbs, the knowledge of the time and place for various breaths, pushes, and muscle contractions. When I was a girl, Indian women in Mexico had to deliver without doctors. Most of the time, they wouldn't even allow us in the hospitals if we were dying. In those cases, sometimes a doctor would come to us. Villages had to have curanderos, healers, shamans, midwives, witches, and the like in order to survive the normal hazards of life. We really did learn things that people don't seem to know today. During a girl's puberty initiation, for example, she would be taught not just about menstruation and reproduction, but also about giving, receiving, and enhancing pleasure. She would then ingest either datura or an alcohol extract of tobacco, and would sometimes also ingest a certain type of red ant that lives in these deserts. The initiate would experience visions and would have to bridge them. And if the woman shamans present saw an omen about the girl, she would be taught female power and would apprentice with a healer, a midwife, or a witch. In my case, I apprenticed at one time or another with all three. My special talent was, of course, for sorcery. Don Juan has told me about some of the male initiation sites in the area. Do the women still have sites as well, Doña Celestina? I asked with great curiosity. Oh, yes. It is really too bad that you do not have this in your culture. Perhaps this is something the Circle of Women should begin. We do have sites, rattlesnake caves, and pillar stones. I'll even take you to one. There you'll see the red handprints of many female initiates, red for the menstrual blood and power, and red rattlesnake motifs painted by young women such as myself, who succeeded in seeing the rattlesnake spirit and received some of the power. Once we have finished your instruction, before we let you return to Yuma for a while, I'll take you there myself. For now, though, we are going to saturate you with knowledge, while we have all three of your teachers in one place, staying here in my home. Do you have any questions about the women's applications of fire breath? Can the women's breath be used at other times or only during sexual arousal? I asked. It is always used during arousal, but it's important to know that arousal doesn't necessarily mean human intercourse, or even some kind of consensual act between human partners. One may feel sexually aroused and potentiated by the forces of nature. Women, for example, can have intercourse with fire, or the steaming water of a cauldron, or with the wind. All that need be done is to breathe the energy in, allow it to enter into the body. When sensations begin, when the serpent begins to awaken, fire up the energy with the breath and pull it upward, center by center. Women do not need men, or even acts of self-excitation for their sexual satisfaction. The elements and forces will provide this if a woman is sensual enough. Also, remember that sexual responses that are circulated through all the centers with the fire breath actually generate energy for the female. This is most important. She can increase and replenish her energy through her sexual response. That is the core of the message, but it must be accomplished properly and with the right intent. Simply engaging in wanton intercourse will not increase energy. It will only increase appetite. I laughed. The sun will be up soon, Doña Celestina said. Perhaps you would like a steamy shower and a nice hot cup of ephedra before breakfast. Thank you for sharing your garden and your knowledge with me, Doña. I said, rising to go. This is something I'll never forget. I hope not, she replied, because Juan has some tall tales for you later today. If you practice the breath, Merlina, the energies will never forget you either. I raised my eyebrows with interest, smiling at the thought, and pushed the wooden door open. Practice 13. Female orgasmic breath. 1. This breath is similar to fire breath. Rather than pulling the energy up the back and down the front, it is pulled up the central energy column within the body and fountains out of the top of the head. Then it flows around the sides and collects again in a pool at the starting point, to be brought back up over and over. 2. Begin by squeezing and pulling up on the vaginal and inner thigh muscles. Combine this action with a powerful inhale through the nostrils, which is accompanied by an abdominal contraction. 3. Continue this breathing and movement and attempt to activate upward uterine contractions while pulling up on all the reproductive muscles. This movement is good for positioning the uterus properly within the body and for counteracting the effects of gravity and menstruation. The flow pulls energy into the uterus through the vagina rather than expelling energy from it. If menstruating, do the breath lying on your back. 4. Now, lift the energy and sensation into the diaphragm and then up into the heart area. Use powerful in-breaths accompanied by upward pulls on the diaphragm and abdominal contractions. Continue all the previous steps, adding these movements to them. 5. Inhale through the back sinuses and combine an abdominal contraction and upward push. This will pull the energy up from the heart into the inner eye. From there, with continued inhales, during which all of these steps are combined at once, the energy will fountain out of the top of the head. The exhales now should be ones of deep satisfaction and release. The energy will flow to your sides at about an arm's length or more, and will then collect in a pool below you to be brought back up once again. Chapter 14. The Male Sexual Energy. Later that day, Don Juan ambled out into the patio, rubbing his cheeks and jaws with his large hands, as if suppressing a big smile. He had on his straw hat to hide the mischievous glint in his eyes, and I knew that I was in for it. I decided that the only way to survive was to be open about my feelings. I must admit that I'm a bit apprehensive about our time together this afternoon, Don Juan, I said with a smile, half joking and at the same time quite serious. He burst out laughing, which was the first and the last thing I needed. Why? He asked with mock concern. You don't think I'm going to talk dirty to you, do you? I heard Chan's cackling from the kitchen. Come on, Merlina, you know me better than that, he joked. I'm not so sure, I replied. Some of your stories can get pretty wild. Chan continued his guffawing and stuck his head out from the kitchen to wink at me. Now that you remind me, Don Juan pondered, stroking his lower jaw. I do have just the perfect tale. He feigned amazement, as though an ingenious idea had just dawned on him out of nowhere. We'd better take a ride in the desert, he advised. I don't want to burn Chan's ears. And I promise I won't start talking until we get there. Otherwise, you might crash the car and kill us both. He held his side as he struggled to hold back his laughter. I was hopeless and I knew it. Chan was hysterical, and Don Juan just stood there grinning at me. He extended his arm to me, and there was nothing I could do but oblige and go with him. Or perhaps hide in my room, in which case I was sure I'd be served up for supper. I accepted my fate. He slapped me between the shoulder blades and bade me welcome. Don't worry, Merlina. You won't be in the least prudish by the time I get through with you. Even if you think that you're already in the know, I'm going to tell you how sorcerers satisfy their women. I may even show you. At that, I heard something non-breakable hit the floor in the kitchen. No doubt Chan was doubled over with laughter until well after we had driven away. The ride into the desert proved to be no consolation, especially when Don Juan began to entertain me with maxims like, I have always felt women are rather like cats who don't want to be bothered unless they come nosing around. The truth of the matter is that I doubted my ability to discern when he was being serious and when he was offering one of his keen parodies of human behavior. I guessed that I would just have to pray and trust my power. Perhaps to settle me, Don Juan asked me to drive in a southerly direction through the Sonoran Desert until we reached the Gulf of Santa Clara, some 50 kilometers from San Luis. We both loved the Gulf, with its warm, clean, calm waters and mysteriously deep tides, some of the most extreme on Earth, retreating in places almost a mile from the high mark. The Gulf of Santa Clara is essentially pristine and almost completely deserted, surrounded by desert terrain, cacti, and saltwater-loving mesquite. It is the northerly starting point of the Sea of Cortez, the waters of which are teeming with 4 species of whale during the winter season: giant sea turtles, marlin, and giant blue prawns, which rank among the most delicious in the world. I was quite exhilarated by the time we arrived, having long forgotten any nervousness, and was looking forward to spending a day at the beach. We parked the Jeep on a solitary stretch of beautiful shoreline and unloaded 2 straw mats that Don Juan had stowed in the back. After a short walk, we found the perfect spot to relax and unrolled the mats on the soft sand. The sun was quite mild, so we took off our hats, rolled up our slacks, and walked in silence for a quarter mile or so. Don Juan enjoyed walking silently at the shore. Whenever we went to nearby beaches, if we stayed overnight, he would invariably rise before the dawn in order to receive the energy patterns of the new day, and would then spend the first moments after sunup quietly raking them into the sand with a dry palm frond. We returned to our straw mats thoroughly refreshed after our walk, and relaxed back, putting our hats over our eyes. Don Juan began the discourse casually, with a matter-of-fact manner. You've probably noticed that there are slightly fewer males born into the world than there are females, he said lightheartedly. Men have often misinterpreted this. Because we are slightly more scarce, we elevate our own importance. Increased value is not the reason for our reduced numbers, however. It only takes one good male to populate, providing that there are many women. I snickered under my hat. Women are the necessary element, he went on. They begin the whole process by bringing the male into existence. Diverse, strong males and females mean a strong species. Males have a competitive streak because, as I said, it takes good ones. We rank one another according to our own criteria for health, strength, courage, intelligence, and integrity. However, the criteria used by women are different and include not only these factors, but also others, not the least of which is sexual potency. Longevity, for example, is directly related to potency in males and is a highly desirable characteristic. So what you mean by potency in no way refers to sexual conquests. Am I right, Don Juan? I asked, relieved that I had my hat to cover my face. Let me address that topic for you at length, he laughed. At our first peak, as very young men, we practically ulcerate for sexual attention and relations. I myself was strong and fit, and very foolhardy I might add. I actually stole a young woman to be my bride from a neighboring tribe, which was common practice among many native groups during my youth. I was so obsessed by my desire that I didn't even notice she had recently given birth until I had her with me. By the time I could return her, the infant had died. Naturally, being a forceful fellow, I took the consequences of my actions very hard. I realized that there is a powerful force behind sexual energy and sought to become wise regarding its uses. One of my first mentors was a rattlesnake shaman. He taught me that though the serpent will often bite, it does not always expel its venom, and that this in part accounts for its longevity and wisdom. Through observing rattlesnakes with my benefactor, I learned how they enter into a relaxed trance state by rolling their eyes up into the back of their heads. By focusing on the top of my head in this fashion, and by pulling the sexual energies and fluids up through the body of the serpent, up through the spine, I was able to ascertain the secret of the dry bite. You see, for a man, the mouth of the serpent becomes the genitals, and the head is the rattle. By sipping back on the sexual energies and fluids, using fire breath up the spine, accompanied by a roll of the eyes deep into the back of the head, rather than by expelling the energy, one increases the number of rattles on the tail. One increases longevity, always indicated by the length of the rattle, and wisdom indicated by its shake, the stimulation. Men do not have limitless sexual energies, despite what we may wish our partners to believe. One way to tell if a male is endowed with abundant sexual energy is, of course, to have intercourse with him. But a woman should never allow herself to conceive, if pregnancy is her desire, until after she has ascertained this among other aspects of her criteria. A male with ample energies will be able to demonstrate them all night without expelling the energies. The next day, he will be energized, even though he has not slept. Neither will he fall into a death slumber afterwards if the energies are released for conception. And when they are, conception will almost invariably occur if the couple is mindful of all the essentials. The act will be pleasurable and always evolve, exploring new territory. It will not become dull and repetitive. For these reasons, when a man is in young adulthood, it is wiser if he views these energies to be the treasures that they are. We are given a limited quantity for a reason, to focus upon quality. The fact that a male can discharge power during intercourse, rather than exclusively generate power, as with the orgasmic female, should cause him to be mindful. Like females, who can be endowed with much natural wisdom in these areas, the adult male should concentrate upon generating and circulating the sexual energy for passion and pleasure, vigorous longevity, and vital well-being. Doña Celestina has told you that a woman need not engage in sexual relations with a human partner in order to have pleasure and circulate the energies. Rather, she may engage energies directly: fire, steaming water, the wind. Once a male has aged and practiced rattlesnake wisdom sufficiently, like an old serpent, he may snort the energies up into his spine, to the top of his head, without engaging in any type of human intercourse or stimulation. This is his second peak. He may also engage external energies directly, providing he has practiced sufficiently and understands the difference between energetic union and penile penetration. We'll discuss that topic at more length another time. But for now, let me point out that it is possible to have energetic intercourse. Is that anything like ritual intercourse? Or like a shaman and his sacred cave? I asked, intrigued. Not like the first, but somewhat like the second, Don Juan replied, chuckling softly. I knew I was in for a story. Do you remember how a sorceress determines her affinity with a particular direction of the wind? He asked in a coy tone. How could I forget? In this ceremony practiced by Sonoran Desert shamans, the initiate, in this case a female, hikes to a deserted spot on a completely windless day. This spot must be frequented by wind from all four directions, and not have one or more directions that are predominant. There, she strips naked and lies spread eagle on a smooth boulder, face up. She must remain until a wind is excited and blows over her. The direction from which the wind comes is her most favorable direction. And if a small twister nicks up, then she has an affinity with all four, which was my case. After approximately 4 hours of lying exposed on a rather fresh desert afternoon some years ago, with Don Juan waiting about a quarter mile away, politely out of sight, I experienced the whirlwind coming to me. I had undertaken the ceremony so that Don Juan could convince me of its effectiveness. After the response from the wind, which included sensations of it tickling my stomach and actually trying to get into my body, I must admit I was completely convinced. Yes, I replied, somewhat suspicious of the theme. Well, he said, in order to do what I'm going to tell you about, in addition to knowing a woman's winds, one must have the double, the energy body, and be able to move it at will, without configuring it into a form. Some practitioners choose to move their energy bodies as wind. What? I exclaimed. I knew a sorcerer who could perform such a maneuver, Don Juan justified with a nod of his head. He had a reputation for terrorizing his female apprentices, but no one could really figure out how he was doing it, since the girls had always been alone, before running into town half naked screaming with fright. Go on, I coaxed him. This sorcerer, whose name was Melchior Angelo, would characteristically present each one of his winds, young female apprentices he would attract, with a blanket hand-woven, each one distinctive. The women always accepted such a valuable and useful gift as a sign of prestige, and as a covenant between sorcerer and apprentice. Melchior would counsel them that if they wish to be imbued with power, they need only lie and sleep naked upon the blanket. Naturally, each one greedily tried it, hoping to be converted instantly into a sorceress of renown or a deity of beauty and power. What happened next was a mystery, but they always experienced fear afterwards and would quickly leave the village, sometimes disappearing within weeks. No villager could figure out what was happening to the women after receiving the blanket, or imagine how this gift could possibly terrify them so, or cause them to run away. Yet it was always afterwards that the girls vanished. No bodies were ever found. So Melchior could not really be accused of anything, and still young women clamored for this sorcerer's attentions, since of course his reputation was rapidly growing. Finally, one day, a young woman came running into town naked after having received the blanket. She was screaming at the top of her lungs. How did she explain herself? I asked. She screamed that she was being fucked by the wind, Don Juan said dramatically. Her family and friends grabbed her and tried to calm her down and put some clothes on her. Together they all walked back to her house, where they found nothing unusual but Melchior's blanket spread out on the floor of her altar room. Well, what happened to the girl? I asked with great curiosity, sitting up and lifting my hat from my face. Oh, she moved away to live with her aunt in another village. Like the others, she turned up elsewhere later, Don Juan remarked casually. No, Don Juan, you can't leave it like that. I mean, what happened to her? What did she experience? I insisted. While Melchior, of course, he said, covering a large smirk on his face by readjusting his hat and then folding his hands over his chest as he continued to recline. His energy body was attached to those blankets, like a breeze blowing around it, and when the women unrolled the blankets and lay down upon them naked, well, I don't think I need to elaborate more. I laughed out loud at the audacity of the maneuver. And what pleasure could he possibly get from that, assuming that he terrified them all half to death? Oh, excitation, and just good sport, Don Juan chuckled knowingly. Ideally, though, he would have found someone who enjoyed it and could harness the energy. I covered a smirk on my face with my hand. Oh, yes, ideally so. Well, I knew I was in for wild stories with you, Don Juan. But I have to admit this one exceeds my expectations, I teased. Never give someone only what they expect, he remarked in a tantalizing voice. What satisfaction is there in that? Practice 14. Rattlesnake breath. 1. This breath is another variation of fire breath, which pulls the energy up the spine and into the top of the head. It may be used by men for seminal retention, or by women and men for longevity and wisdom. Visualize an open-mouthed rattlesnake. The mouth is your genital area, the body your spine. The rattle is rooted in your inner eye, and as the serpent ages, it will lengthen. In advanced practitioners, the rattle will sometimes emerge from an opening at the central top of the forehead, near the hairline. 2. Perform fire breath up the back, pulling the energy through all the spinal centers, using forceful inhales through the nostrils and abdominal contractions. Keep the body relaxed. Do not stiffen or tense the body in any way. In men, bodily rigidity, especially in the legs, is often a precursor to ejaculation. Use the sheer force of the inhales to move energy upward. 3. As the energy reaches the heart area, roll the eyes up and back into the skull. Continue the inhales and abdominal contractions. Concentrate on inhaling with the back sinuses as the energy rises from the spine and floods the inner eye, located near the pineal gland. 4. The energy will climax by becoming erect and vibrating or rattling the pineal, which will open the inner eye when you are ready. The shaking of the pineal releases pleasure, well-being, and a wisdom-enhancing elixir into the brain. Chapter 15. The Celestial Wash. On our return from the Gulf of Santa Clara, Don Juan and I stopped at a local vendor and purchased several kilos of giant blue prawns. Doña Celestina oversaw their preparation, demonstrating to her girls the proper method of cleaning, and requesting them simmered in coconut milk and green chili, served with steamed chayote, a small succulent green squash with a large, soft, edible seed. As we sat down at the patio dining table, such a ferocious wind kicked up that we had to move the meal into the kitchen and eat at the cozy wooden table in front of the gas stove. The kitchen was warmed by the glow of kerosene lanterns, reflecting off the blue and white Puebla tiles and softly whitewashed walls. We made ourselves comfortable at the lively hand-painted dinette, as the wind whistled and howled, blowing dust throughout the patio. "There'll be thunder and lightning, but no rain until very late tonight," Chan commented, sniffing the air as he rolled up a corn tortilla filled with prawns and sauce. "I think the wind is looking for Merlina. It's a good thing we moved inside, or we'd never be able to finish our food," Don Juan teased. Everyone laughed, and I endured poking and jokes about the wind all through supper. Doña Celestina suggested that now might be the time for me to hide in my room, as if she had been reading my thoughts of earlier that day, saying that she needed me fresh for all the work we were going to do, and not worn out from a sleepless night with the wind. Despite their endless charades and antics and all our laughter, I managed to eat my goodly portion of the delicious meal, and determined to sleep afterwards, retiring to my room while they were still hooting. My sleep was continually disturbed throughout the night by the rattling of the wind at my door and the moaning sound of its blowing underneath through the doorwell. This racket was occasionally punctuated by loud banging, which would startle me, almost levitating a few inches above my bed for a moment, as the door visibly shook before my eyes with the force of an invisible blow. This would be followed by the sound of Chan's cackling, or Don Juan's hysterical laughter coming through the walls. It was quite a challenging night. When finally there was a human knock at the door, I almost didn't answer it. Only the sound of Doña Celestina's laughter on the other side convinced me to get out of bed. When I finally peeked through the door, she was standing there with a candle in her hand. "Cuando toca la pelona, no se abre," she said. "When old women's death knocks, one doesn't open." "Ni para el viento abro," I responded. "Neither do I open for the wind." She doubled over with laughter, holding on to her candle with one hand and to the back of a nearby chair for support with the other. When I had splashed my face and put on my dressing gown, I joined her outside on the patio. The wind seemed to still, and a soft, warm drizzle began to fall. The sensation of the gentle, warm drops tapping on my head and running down my neck was so relaxing after the night's bumpy ride that all of a sudden I experienced an all-over bodily shudder, which began at my head and rushed all the way down to my toes and into the earth. It felt as though someone had opened the top of my head and poured warm scented oil through my body. The sensation was ecstatic, most pleasurable, and caught my abdomen with the thrill one experiences from a soft dip on a roller coaster. I have at times experienced such a feeling listening to moving poetry or music, or viewing a magnificent work of art, or an awesome natural spectacle of beauty. But never have I had such a feeling standing in the rain at night, seemingly devoid of most visual and auditory sensations, and yet filled to the brim with them. Doña Celestina held the candlelight up to my eyes and examined them a long time, looking within my pupils. "That's good," she said. "It would be a shame for the wind to do all that work for nothing. Let's sit down in the rocking chairs and enjoy this warm, caressing rain." I was quite amenable to her suggestion, warmed by it in fact, and made myself comfortable in one of the bentwood rockers. She did the same a short distance across from me, rocking in silence. Rocking was almost hypnotic, lulling me into a sensation of protection, of comfort and ease I hadn't had since I was a child, and had experienced very seldom even then. "I call that shuddering sensation you felt the celestial wash," she remarked softly. It is a response of the energy body to something that thrills it. The sensation cannot be forced or manipulated like an orgasm, purely of the sexual physical body. And rather than beginning from the bottom and working its way up, this ecstasy originating within the energy body, begins from the top, opens, and melts downward. Is that a good description of what you felt? She asked. It's close to perfection, I responded with awe. Have you ever had such a sensation before? Sometimes, during the climax of a beautiful piece of music or a magnificent soliloquy. At times, tears will involuntarily wash over my eyes as well, I said. For some reason, my voice was trembling, as though I were about to cry. It means you are very sensitive and powerfully passionate, she said softly. What you experienced is the energy body's orgasm. It cannot be manufactured. Sometimes it can be cultivated by teaching others to be more sensitive, but many live a lifetime without ever feeling what you just felt, even once. Perhaps I know what you mean, I said. I saw a film once about the composer Mozart and a contemporary, the composer Salieri, who despite all his efforts could never once feel or hear the inspiration from which sprang Mozart's compositions. Salieri was moved to heights by the music, but he wanted to create such bliss himself. He was never able, and even asked Mozart to explain his inspiration, which still did not change Salieri's ability. You are also very artistic, Doña Celestina replied. Had you been born full-blooded into a native community, no doubt you would have been a peerless weaver or a basket maker. Your story focuses in on exactly what I was trying to explain. The sensation happens by grace. It is a blessing that is spontaneous. It cannot be forced or taught or copied. You are a very lucky woman. Yes, you weave very well, Merlina. Perhaps you should weave with words, she pondered thoughtfully. One of the tools of your culture. Become a storyteller. Storytellers are highly respected artists among Native people. Many were and are women. You have a gift. In our culture, though, the storytellers never wrote down their stories, so you would be an exception. I think that you are always the exception to the rule, Merlina. She nodded silently to herself. It's very kind of you to say, Doña, I replied. I have certainly seen, heard, and learned more than enough from all of you to spin some very good tales. I don't flatter, she asserted. If I see the energy, I call it by its right name. That's all. Inspiration, as you call it, or ecstasy, is one of the highly evolved manifestations of sexual energy, but not the sexual energy of the physical body alone. Rather, we are moving now into expressions of the evolving sexual energy of the energy body. The sensation you felt can also occur during powerful expressions of dreaming. It is as though the luminous butterfly begins to emerge from its luminous cocoon and experiences the thrill of being what is truly becoming. That takes energy, Merlina, and a tremendous amount of work. You are there. Again, I repeat that you are truly fortunate. Some people never get to this place on the path. Despite a lifetime of efforts, they remain terrestrial. What this means is that you are going to be with us now even longer than you expected. Don Juan, Chan, and I will have some additional gems to share with you, even beyond what we had already planned. Some of the crowning stones of the path. Congratulations, you've earned it. I didn't know quite what to say. Perhaps this experience might be easier for some to seek in dreaming, away from the daily grind and the lack of inspiration due to our consensus agreement of ordinary perceptions, I suggested. It won't happen if the individual is not ready to be moved, she said. If their islands are not swept clean, people sabotage themselves with trivia. And then there is the matter of being blessed on the inside. One must cultivate a free-floating, genuine magical nature. Not an easy thing to do in this world. Such a nature is as rare as the magical deer of the Bacatete Sierra among the Yaqui, south of here. Still, if one dreams with this intent and sets it up as a task, what does one do? I asked. One might begin by dreaming one's evolving sexual energy, she replied. In that way, the dreamer would be within the domain proper of the energy body, providing that the individual is lucid, awakened within the dream, and visionary, and not indulging in non-awakened, base symbolic dreams dealing with urges, repressions, and the like. I see. Doña Celestina sets up tasks with the consummate artistry of her superlative beadwork. I thought to myself, there's much to learn in their design. They might not like what they see, but it would be a start, providing they can dream, she went on. Then again, there are occasional pleasant surprises. At the very least, it would activate the process of sensitization, of seeing the sexual energies as energetically evolutionary, rather than merely procreative. Such a task would foster creativity and could lead to inspiration, giving them a glimpse of directions in which they might like to move. The energy body is devoid of ego, you see. So if these practices are undertaken in dreaming, again providing that one is truly awakened within the dream, the energy body will show a truthful view. That would be an advantage. Most people have a great deal of ego and competitiveness surrounding their sexual energy, while they conceive of themselves only as expressions of a physical body. I wonder, though, why do you ask all these questions? Are you thinking of teaching people how to dream? Chan has suggested it, I volunteered. That would be interesting, she mused. It could only be of benefit, as long as you are careful what you show them. Nothing of the dastardly deeds I sometimes have to do or undo. Why don't you go back to bed now and try the task I shared with you? Never ask anyone to do something you haven't navigated yourself first, if you are truly interested in accepting such a responsibility. I thanked her and got up and returned to my room. It would now be quite easy to fall asleep. The wind was silent, and the soft rain a mere mist. The night was still and soothing, and I was very, very sleepy. The last thing I heard before entering dreaming was the call of a quail that had perhaps alighted and perched on a branch of her papaya tree. With the intent of my task behind the force of my lucidity, I awakened into the realization that I was dreaming, when I found myself surrounded by a golden white light emptiness. There was a soft tone resonating, which reminded me of the sound of a crystal bowl softly ringing. The sound was permeated by the light. In fact, it was the light, and the light was the sound. This was my energy, unconfigured, as Don Juan had explained, expressing nothing but my luminous nature and my awareness. The dreaming followed me into the first moments of opening my eyes at early morning. I found the air to be animated, filled with globules of luminous matter that I was able to catch with my fingertips and direct into a spin around one another, like atoms or tiny solar systems. I kept closing my eyes, expecting the effect to go away, but it didn't. Each time I opened my eyes again, there was a luminous scene, the globules, and the possibility of putting them in little groups to spin around one another. The texture of the substance felt like pure creative energy, and I sensed myself as the essence of creativity. Finally, after several consecutive experiences, I felt as though a part of me went very lightly to sleep, and I found myself in my normal state of awareness, but left with the afterglow. I realized at that moment what Chan had always professed to me about dreaming, that in our normal state of awareness, we are actually more asleep than when we dream.